Hi everyone. Today we're going to complete a plot diagram for The Outsiders, the wonderful book by S.E. Hinton. Let's get started. So you should have one of these wonderful plot diagrams in your flipbook. So get that ready. Anytime during this video you need to pause to give yourself time to copy down what you need to write, go ahead and pause and then just press play when you're done. Okay, let's get started. The first thing is writing down the title and the author. That's pretty easy. The title is The Outsiders and the author is S.E. Hinton. Now let's start with the setting, the situation, and the characters. Well, we know that the setting is not actually mentioned, but we are pretty sure that it is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's in the streets of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The OK means Oklahoma, and the time setting is the 1960s. The situation is the narrator is the first person, limited, omniscient, and the story is about two groups of boys in the 1960s who hate each other. The narrator lives with his brothers. Okay? The characters, we know that there's a big long list of characters, and here they are. Ponyboy Michael Curtis, Soda Pop Patrick Curtis, Dallas Winston, Johnny Cade, etc. This is probably one of those times when you want to press pause in order to write these down. You can add any other characters if you wanted, but these are the principal characters. We also know that they're divided into social groups. So there's the greasers, they're the poor East Side kids, and they're disliked and disapproved of by adults. And the socias, who are the rich West Side kids, and their bad behavior is excused by adults. The exposition. Well, the book begins with the introduction of a teenager named Ponyboy Curtis. He explains, because he is the narrator, and he introduces the events in his life as a brother, an orphan, and a friend and fellow gang member, a greaser, and the rivalry to the socias. Let's think about protagonists and antagonists. Well, the main protagonist we know is Ponyboy Curtis. However, you could also consider the whole group of the greasers as being the protagonists versus the socias. There's not one in particular. The conflict. I'm going to move my picture over here for this part. Okay. There's so much conflict. Let's look at the different types of conflict in The Outsiders. We have person versus person, and that's of course the greasers versus the socias. We have person versus society, and that is the greasers' look versus what is expected in society, and the socias' look is more acceptable by society. This is the physical description of the greasers when I say their look. Then we have person versus self. Ponyboy struggles to grow up and accept the circumstances in which he lives. Johnny struggles with his decision to turn himself in after having committed the crime, and Dally struggles with his emotions and his deep unhappiness. So those are some examples of conflict. You might be able to find more. Here we have the rising action. Again, I'm going to scoot over here. Okay. And the rising action I'm going to write from bottom to top. So the first thing is Ponyboy and his friends go to the movies and meet Sherry or Cherry. Then after that, Ponyboy and Johnny get beaten up in the park by the socias, and Johnny kills a soc. Number three in this example, but in order of events, Ponyboy and Johnny ask Dally for help, and they go to the church. And Dally comes to visit them at the church, and Johnny decides to turn himself in. Okay, that is what I consider to be the rising action. Some of this is debatable, though, and I'll talk more about that in the next slide, the climax. I think the climax is that Ponyboy, Dally, and Johnny return to the church and they see that it is on fire. This is after they've gone out for lunch. They return, they see it's on fire. Johnny and Ponyboy save the children. We know that Johnny gets terribly injured and they go to the hospital. Some other people might disagree with me completely and say, no, that's not the climax. The climax actually comes later in the rumble, or the climax might even be when Johnny dies. I think this is a valid climax. I think the other climaxes are arguable as well. They're valid as well, but this is what I've chosen to put in my plot diagram. So as you can see, some things can be interpreted differently by different people. The falling action, which of course comes after the climax, there's a rumble with the socias, which is planned. The greasers win the rumble. Johnny dies and Dali dies. So now the action is falling towards its resolution. And the resolution, from my point of view, is that Ponyboy recovers from his injuries. He returns to school and he writes this story that we're reading, looping back to the beginning. So what's the theme of The Outsiders? So many themes. So many themes. We have the consequences of divided communities, in this case the greasers, the socias, east side, west side. The strength of an identity, the identity that a person identifies with, how strong that is for a person. The definition of family, that comes up a lot, also because Ponyboy, as we know, is an orphan. And the power of male-female relationships. What if Ponyboy and Cherry had not spoken? What if they hadn't seen each other in the cinema? What if Dali had behaved differently in the cinema? Would this have happened? That's all for the plot diagram for today. There's a nice photo from the movie, which I hope you get to see one day in order to compare to the book. Okay, so that's all for now. Bye-bye.